In this video, I'm going to show you the basic steps to how to go from your drawings for your tiny house model to a finished model. I won't walk you through every step, but I'll go through the basics for each type of wall and window and door feature, and we'll speed through it. Let's go. To start, you're going to need a few things. First, you'll need your drawings that have been approved by the teacher. You're going to need a pair of scissors numbered to match your table. They'll be back on the cabinet door. You'll need your pencil. You'll need a sheet protector. You'll get that from your teacher. You need a cutting mat, which you'll get from the supply table. You'll also get a glue bottle, should match your table number from the supply table. And then you'll need a razor blade for your table from the teacher. You'll need some wood that you'll get from the supply table. It's 1/8 by 1/4 of an inch. And then lastly, you'll need some tape, just a few inches at a time to get started. First step that you're going to do is cut this big sheet down into smaller pieces so that we can work on it a little easier. Now we're going to start with a square wall, so we'll separate the two square walls, the rectangular walls, into single pieces, and then we'll have our end walls as one solid piece. So we're going to start with our wall number 2. So you're going to take your scissors and cut that out. You'll want to leave the margins on the side here and here as well. Okay, what we're going to do now that we have our wall piece cut out here, we're going to put it so that we have a margin space of the paper here next to the opening of the sheet protector. You can see we have the sheet protector opened up. So we're going to slide that in so it's right here along the crease of the sheet protector. And take a couple little pieces of tape. We don't need much. Just about 1.5 inches total maybe. A couple small pieces of tape. We're going to stick those to the back side of our template so there's just a little bit of tape sticking out. Again, just a little bit. Kind of put them on toward the corners. We're going to slide that in so that it is right into the crease of the corner, and so that this gets right to the edge of the sheet protector. And that way we're just going to take this tape then and fold it over the sheet protector to help keep this piece in place. So there we have our paper right into the crease of the sheet protector, and it's taped here so that it does not want to wander around. All right, so the next step is to start making the outline. I guess we've got this upside down here, so you can see we have our design. This is our door design here. So we have our sill plate for the whole wall, our top plate, and our end studs. Even though we said before we're going to cut this out, we're going to build the wall with this piece in it and cut it out later. By keeping that piece there while we build it, we'll make sure everything stays square and straight. Okay, so first thing you're going to do is get a stick from table. We'll start you with just one piece of wood. You will need more, but we'll just start with one for managing space at your table. And what you're going to do with your pencil is simply lay this next to the drawing so it matches up at the end. So I'm laying it right next to my sill plate. So I've got it matched up at the end here, and I'm going to come all the way over here to the end and mark it even with the end of the wall. So I'm going right across the piece of wood, and I'm going to do that twice because our sill plate and our top plate are the exact same length. So I'm just going to mark the pieces we need here across the bottom. So I slide my mark, I slide it to the end of the sill plate, and I come back down here, I draw across the end for how long it needs to be. Okay, I'm going to take and cut these two off first. So I need my cutting mat in front of me, and I need my razor blade. Now it's important that you keep the cap on the razor blade until you're ready to cut. These are very sharp. razor sharp blades, and they can hurt you if you are not paying attention. So being careful. What you're going to do is line up the blade with your marking. Make sure the blade is straight up and down. You're going to push down and forward at the same time. Give it a little arc action, and you'll have a clean cut. So you'll cut the one, and you'll cut the second piece in line and down. Nice cut. As soon as you've cut it, you're going to put the cap on that, set it off to the side so your partner can use it. Then we're going to take this here and we're going to cut out the two end studs of this wall. So we have our end studs here. We're going to cut those out as well. Taking this same piece, and we're going to lay it up here so it's even next to this. And if you can tell, I'm stopping inside of the top stud here. So I'm not to the top plate, I'm below it. This piece of wood has to fit in between the top plate and the sill plate. So what I'm going to do is down here, I'm going to mark across where the sill plate meets. I'm going to do that twice, so I'll slide that back up to the sill plate. And we'll come down here. Mark that, and we'll do the same thing. We'll cut it. Cut those two pieces right there on the mark. And cut. And cut. Okay, set that piece off to the side for now. Put the cap on the razor blade. And I'll set my cutting mat off to the side here. What we're going to do is get a couple pieces of tape about an inch long or so. And we are going to tear these into skinny pieces, skinny strips that can fit in between the studs on our paper. Okay, we'll keep those off to the side for now. The reason we're doing that is we need to tape the top plate and sill plate into place so that they do not move in order to glue in our studs. So we're taping those in so they don't move so that we can glue our studs to them. So we have a little practice layout, our top plate and our sill plate, and our end studs. We'll just do one more quick check on the measurements and see if that everything fits. And everything seems to be fitting quite well and lining up with the marks how we wanted. So that's a good thing. So we're going to start here with our top plate. Now the trick with this is you have to make sure that instead of laying flat like this, it's standing on edge. We do not want it to lay flat down. We want it on edge.
Yeah. Technical difficulties. The camera died. Hold on. So picking up where we left off at the first intro video, you can see that we have the top plate and sill plate taped to the paper on edge, and notice that the tape is in between the studs. The tape does not sit where you're going to have any pieces attached. This is very important to building the wall successfully. The next step is going to be to glue the two main studs that we previously cut and get them glued to the top plate and the sill plate. To do that, you're going to place a little bit of glue on an open part of your sheet protector. Just a little dab is all you need to get it set. The wood glue will set up on the plastic later. To get the glue on the studs, all you're going to do is just very lightly dip the end of the stud pieces, both ends, into the little puddle of glue, just a tiny little drop at each end, and then you're going to place it into the wall framing in between the top plate and the sill plate, and you'll squeeze it gently for 20 to 30 seconds before moving on to the other end stud. For the other end stud, you'll repeat that exact same process, a light dip into the puddle of glue on each end, and then you fit it into place and hold it there between the top plate and the sill plate for 20 to 30 seconds until it starts to tack up and stick together. The next step is to make all the full length studs for the wall. So first count up how many you need per your design, and then I just simply lay it next to the end studs that we just glued in once they're tacked up, and then you can mark it with the pencil for the length you need, and you can just keep sliding them down and marking like we did at the beginning until you have enough full-length studs. You may need a new piece of wood at this point. That's okay, just go to the supply table and grab one if you need one. Once you have all the studs marked on your sticks of balsa, you're going to go ahead and cut those out safely with the razor blade on the cutting mat, and then lay them in place, and then do a dry fit before you glue them in permanently to the wall framing. For the next, we're going to frame around this doorway. And we're going to start with the trimmer studs. You can see pointing in the picture. These will be the easiest ones, and we'll lay them out and measure the wood just like we did before. Set the wood stick across the opening and measure that, mark it so it's flush with the bottom of the framing. And then you will mark the wood and cut it to length and test fit it before we glue it in. When you glue the trimmer studs in, you don't want to have a ton of glue and cause squeeze out and cause your wall to stick to the sheet protector. So you just need to put a few dots along the whole length, kind of near the ends and a couple in the middle. And I always put one little dab of glue at the very end where it's going to connect to the sill plate. Just lightly put those glue on, and you're going to hold it in place again for another 20-30 seconds, snug up against the bottom of the sill plate and the full-length stud. And you do this to both sides. The door header is the next part, and we measure this out by putting the stick of wood across the opening of the doorway between the two full-length studs, and we mark that width, and you need to cut 2 of those pieces, and again, always dry fit them before we go on to gluing. To correctly assemble our header, we need to take those 2 pieces and sandwich them together on the wide side. So we dry fit both to make sure they fit in first. Once they do, just a couple of dabs of glue in between to get them to stick, and then a dab of glue on each end of that header, and it should fit in nice and snug and sit on top of the trimmer studs in order to be fit properly in place. The last step of framing around a door is to add the cripples above the doorway between the top plate and the doorway. So if you did the door on any wall other than the 8-foot tall wall number 1, you will have at least 1 cripple stud to put in above the door. Same process, measure the gaps, mark it, cut it, dry fit. Once it fits snug, you're going to lay it in on edge to make it look like all the rest of the studs, and then this wall would be done. So the process of building the angled end walls is basically the same as the rectangular walls. The only difference being that the angled top plate causes you to have more precision and be more careful about your layout markings and your cuts when you're building these walls in order to make everything fit and stay strong and sturdy. So you can see we're starting with our top plate and sill plate again, just like on the side view. However, the top plate requires you to pay more attention to the angle. You can see here how we have it lined up against the drawing, and we've had to make the angled marks across the narrow edge of the top plate. This is what makes it more difficult because we're going to have to cut across the grain. So you have to make these angled markings across the top plate. The bottom plate or the sill plate is the same straight across markings that you've done before. When you cut these angles across the narrow edge of the top plate, you have to be really careful to hold it still on edge with your fingers, but also keeping them far enough away from the blade that you do not cut yourself. You need to get it lined up just right and push straight down with a little bit of a forward slide to it, and it should slice through. Don't try to smash it too hard, just let the blade slice through, and it should be pretty close to the angle you need. Once you have your top plate and sill plate cut and they match the drawings, you're going to tape them down carefully. Again, noting that the tape is in between the studs, and it's really important that you get that top plate lined up properly with the angle. Otherwise, the vertical wall studs will not fit in as they should. When you go to add the end studs in, take note here that it is longer, needs to be longer than what it is at the edge. So when you go to measure out the length of your studs, you make them a little longer. Easy way to do that is to set the piece of the wood across the top of your top plate and sill plate, and then draw the angle on your new stud piece that matches the angle of your top. Then you can draw flat across for the bottom and cut that and fit in place. Do that for both ends of your stud wall, again, carefully fitting through. And if your piece is a little short, that's okay, save it. You can use it for some other framing pieces later on. Here you can see a close-up of the shallow angle that you need to cut at the top of your studs for the angled walls. You see it compared to a square cut piece just above it. It is a very slight angle, but if you do not cut that, or at least close to correctly, your studs will all be loose and they will fall out and they will not have time for the glue to set up before they can stay in place. And once again, once your end studs are set and your wall is kind of dried a little bit, you're going to fill in all of your full length studs. This wall just happens to be all studs. The next wall has a window, but we'll still do all the full length studs and the exterior framing of top plate, sill plate, and end studs as well. Framing out the windows starts off the same way as the doors. You're going to start with the trimmer studs. Again, laying your sticks across the top of the drawing, marking it and cutting them and fitting them flush in place with just a couple dots of glue so that we can fit them in tightly. And then we go to the header as well, again doubling up the layers of sticks, glue those together in one piece and fitting them snugly in place on top of the trimmers. This is also the time when you'd want to add the sill plate for the window. In this case, it is same process as the header, except it lays on edge like your wall studs and is only one layer thick. The last step to framing around windows is to add the cripples above and below. You can see we have both of those here, and on this particular window, there is the cripple is doubled up with the full length stud that surrounds the window. Yours may have this, yours may not, depends on your spacing and what you drew. But if it does, just go ahead and glue it on there the same way we did all of our other trimmer studs. You're going to continue doing this until you have all of the walls framed. To make the base for your tiny house, you're going to need the plan view part of the drawings cut from your plans. Trim that out right along the outside edge of it. And then you're also going to need a sheet of green foam core that you'll get from the teacher. To prep the base, once you have your design piece trimmed, you're going to just simply glue it down in the center of the foam core base so you have an even green edge all the way around. Make sure it is really flat and all the bubbles from the glue and everything are out, and clean up any glue smear before it sets up as big hard globs that may affect the ability to glue your walls in place. The first step to getting your tiny house fully assembled is to lay out your walls and match them up to the floor plan. So you have to pay attention to which wall is which. If you remember the long 12-foot long by 8-foot tall wall, the shorter of the walls is the wall number 1. The 12-foot by 10-foot wall is wall number 2. So the big tall wall should be on wall number 2. Your angled walls will fit in based on your drawing. So line those up with the base to make sure you have them in the correct spot before you start gluing pieces in. Before you glue your walls down, you want to make sure one last time that they match up with the drawing and they are the correct length and size, and that they're the correct length. There's no overhangs, anything like that. When you glue them down, let's start with wall 1. Just put a thin bead of glue down there, spread it nice out and even, and then hold it nice and steady and still in the drawing, making sure you stay within the lines for wall 1 on your base sheet. The rest of the construction for putting the full walls in just follows the order of wall 2, wall 3, wall 4. However, my wall 2 is where I had my doorway. And if you recall, when we did our design, we talked how that bottom sill plate piece in the doorway would be cut out. So now is the time we're going to do that. We'll simply mark the lines to cut across the sill plate by following the trimmer studs in. And then very carefully, holding the blade straight up and down with your blade, you're going to cut that out and being very careful not to crush your wall in the process. Once I have my door cut out carefully, I glued in wall 2 using the same process as wall 1, just taking double extra care that I'm keeping the wall square and fully matched up at the corners because of the opening. I don't want the wall to pinch in. I then add walls 3 and 4 in, again gluing the bottom, but this time adding just a little bead of glue on the outside edge of each side of them, on the ends of the walls, so that they can glue into wall 1 and wall 2. You don't need a lot of glue, just enough to tack it, and you're going to hold that together gently until it's all set up.